Hello OT friends and welcome to the Uncommon OT series. I'm Patricia Modis and I'm your host, a Filipino-American, native New Yorker, currently based in Los Angeles, bulldog mama, and an uncommon occupational therapist myself for the past 22 years. On this podcast, you will hear me proudly feature the unique careers of occupational therapy practitioners working in non-traditional and role-emerging practice areas, settings where OT is uncommon. I invite you to receive a dose of OT inspiration, to learn, to think outside of the box, and to be energized and motivated to follow in these unconventional paths. Happy listening.
So we are so excited to be here with you today. Our panelists and I are all occupational therapists in common. It's our first time at South by, so we are just thrilled to be here because this discussion is so important. It's something that affects all of us. It's all about how we interact with the world. So to get us started, I'd love for you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable, but picture this. I want you to take a moment and picture that you're walking into a beautifully designed space. Maybe a store, a public plaza, or maybe even your own home. The lighting is perfect, the materials are sleek, and the layout is very inviting. But then something is off. You reach for a shelf, but it's just out of reach. You try to read a sign, and the text is just too small. You go to open a door, but the handle is too narrow to grip. Suddenly, the space that's been so carefully designed doesn't quite work for you. It's frustrating, it's limiting, and in that moment, you feel excluded. This is the hidden challenge of design. Bad design doesn't just inconvenience, it actually excludes. But great design is invisible. Why? Because it works. It flows, it adapts, it welcomes, and it makes life easier for most of us, for all of us. And this is where occupational therapy and design intersect. Occupational therapists, or they call us OTs for short, we aren't just healthcare providers. We are human experience engineers. We don't just treat injuries. We also design solutions for everyday problems to make life more functional and really more accessible. So today, we are diving into the game-changing concept of occupation-centered design. We have an incredible panel of expert occupational therapists here with us today. They're all breaking ground in the design space, really creating inclusive, engaging, and user-friendly experiences for the world, really. But before we dive in, let's just do something kind of fun. I'd like for you to raise your hand if you've ever worked with an occupational therapist before. Whoa!
Ooh. Okay, couple.
Two.
That's about normal.
Yes, we're thrilled. Again, OTs are not, this is not the space for us typically. We're healthcare providers, so we go to health-related conferences. So to be here is such an honor for us to introduce to you what we do. So for those of you who have not worked with an OT before, do not worry. By the end of today's talk, you'll know exactly why OTs and designers should really be collaborating. Okay? So I'd like for you now to meet our incredible panelists. They all come from different areas of occupational therapy and are here to share their knowledge and expertise. So first we have Esther Bay, who specializes in inclusive beauty and product design. Next to her is Heiderscheidt.
Hi.
She is an expert in aging and thriving in place. And last but not the least, we have Francisco Lasta, whose work focuses on designing inclusive spaces. So hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
So I'd love for you to get us started. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourselves, a little bit about occupational therapy and your specialties?
Hi, everyone. My name is Esther. I'm an occupational therapist, makeup artist, and the founder of an agency focused on collaborating with brands, companies, suppliers on co-creating disability-inclusive products and services. It's not just about designing accessible products. For me, it's really about setting up frameworks that the companies can use to serve this largely underserved but significant market. And for me, OT is more than a profession. It's really a lens through which I view the world. It helps me to engage in the world. We were just talking about that in the green room. All the strategies that we use, like for me, holding this mic, which is weighted, is like a strategy that I'm using to calm and center myself. But yeah, it's also been a driving force for change where dignity and design can come together. And yeah, it's just really exciting to see, the interest in this conversation, and I'm super excited to be here today, so thank you all for joining us. Should we share favorite occupations?
Yes, and also we have a slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Here you go. I'd like to bring your attention to our slide. This is the center of what we do as occupational therapists. From the moment you wake up in the morning to bedtime, in between, we are all engaged in these occupations. So all of those images in the middle are the variety of things, or some of the things that you and I might enjoy doing. So our days are composed of occupations, and that's what we're focused on as occupational therapists.
Right, totally. So for me, my favorite occupations at the moment are raising 2 little ones, and if not that, then just enjoying a hot, strong cup of coffee. Emphasis on strong. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And my name is Dawn Heiderscheidt. I am the owner of a company called Aurora Independence, and we are based in the greater Philadelphia area of Pennsylvania. And what we focus on is more in the construction and design space. So I actually navigate those renovation areas more than I work in healthcare. And so what we do is we help designers and construction people who are trying to add on ADUs or which is accessory dwelling units, or doing renovations to a home to let multi-generational living occur or things like that. So I help families and that industry navigate properly so that when people are spending massive amounts of money on their homes and their personal spaces, those spaces will actually work for them. And so when we're talking about occupations and occupation-inspired design, we have to think about all of those occupations that are occurring in the middle of the day. How are they sleeping? Where do they bathe? How do they dress? And how do we make it work for them? Because homes should really be their sanctuary. So outside of the occupation of entrepreneur and business owner, I am also an equestrian. I have ADHD, and I collect hobbies like no one else. So I do a lot of other stuff as well. Not all of it well, but I do a lot of it. So like we were saying, occupations can be a job, but not all jobs are occupations. So that's me. Hello.
Thank you, Dawn. I just want to reiterate that, like, a lot of people really, when they hear occupational therapy, like, the first thing that comes to mind is, like, jobs, but jobs is just one of those. My name is Francisco Lasta. I'm also an occupational therapist. I work for an architecture firm called Muller II, a part of Gannett Fleming Trans Systems. Our architecture firm specializes in designing public spaces, from airports, transit stations, schools, parks, among others. I work with our inclusive design team to make sure that all of these projects, if not all, at least most of them would be not just accessible, but also inclusive. My favorite occupation is improv. I do improv at the Second City Training Center. It just makes me so focused, so engaged with whatever I'm doing when I'm up on the stage doing improv. It might be different now because I'm not doing improv. But that's my favorite occupation. So if you see most of the things that are shown there, they're like hobbies or something, but it's more than hobbies too. So it's more than jobs, more than hobbies. It's like, I also like making the bed, and that's an occupation.
Thank you, everybody. So this image here that's projected right now, you can see that's all of us engaged in the most meaningful occupations. And if you take a look at each of those images, you really see that design clearly plays a role in supporting or sometimes hindering folks from participating in these occupations, right? So keeping that in mind, and now that we've talked about occupations and its relationship to design, Francisco, can you break down for us occupation-centered design?
So as the term says, occupation-centered, occupation is the center of the design thinking process. So it's all about identifying what occupation are you designing for, and how can you make that design of a space, product, or even a service be supportive of those occupations. And people do different occupations differently. If you have a disability, you might get yourself dressed in the morning differently than a non-disabled person. If you are a member of the LGBTQA plus population, you might see differently. You might also do things differently. So considering all those elements that comprises of like the occupation, and make your design, tweak it so that as people do those meaningful activities, they feel supported, and it's easier for them to do it, and it's meaningful.
Thank you. It's occupation-centered design really reshapes the way that we look at the user experience, right? So hopefully that's also kind of
Yes.
Yep.
Getting drilled into your minds as we're saying this
That's your
over and
takeaway.
over. Yes. So it's clear that design isn't just about the look or the aesthetic, right? It's about real-world function and really usability. So Dawn, from your perspective, why are occupational therapists crucial in design and innovation?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question because when I was thinking about it and how to answer it, I kind of thought about how most of our industries are usually operating in a silo. So we don't always look at what other people are doing or what the end result is because we kind of only care about what we need to do in our profession. And so one of the things that I like about occupational therapists and when those innovative collaborations can occur is because OTs bring this really human-centered approach to something. And when we go through a design process or a renovation process or we're making up products, we're kind of thinking about the end goal of making money. We're in a capitalist society, so here we are. But when we forget about the humans, we don't make a good product. So I think occupational therapists can really help bring that human-centered design back into the process, which is really needed because we also understand a diverse group of people and abilities that people bring and the needs that they have. Because we're healthcare workers first, we have the opportunity of bringing to a team this idea that we have met hundreds and thousands of people, that you can only bring so many people to your focus groups, but we've probably met 100 people with MS. We've probably met 100 older adults. And while each person is their own person, it's really important to remember that we may see a theme that no matter how hard you try in your industries to do so, you're just not going to see it to the same extent. And we see the end results of bad design almost every day. So the number of times that we act as, sort of the gatekeeper of what people purchase sometimes, we will tell people, don't use that one because in 5 years that's not going to work for you anymore. Choose this one because this one has a 10-year lifespan. And so as you're designing websites or products or anything like that, and again, my stuff comes from renovation and construction, but that's really a piece that we can bring to a team that might not be easily accessible. So.
Dawn, I totally agree with that because when I woke up this morning, getting ready, on my way to here, I encountered several design things, design places that are like, I wish they designed it this way because it's really difficult. Like wayfinding is one of those. Some products are difficult to manipulate. I have a little bit of arthritis, and those things that you have to open makes it difficult. Why can't they be designed better?
So thank you. Yes, I'm an OT, as you guys are all already know. This is just speaking to my OT heart because, what we're really focused on is making life easier for people, right? Whether it's opening a door or opening a package or experiencing a space. So Esther, with your work at the intersection of beauty and design, can you share how occupational therapists are shaping design?
Yes, I'd love to. So when it comes to beauty and personal care products, most are created with an assumed level of vision, strength, dexterity, cognitive ability, which excludes a large portion of the market. I mean, there's a strong business case for creating products that are inclusive of people with different abilities, whether that's physical disabilities or the aging population or, our neurospicy friends. And lots of younger ones, like we have different generations very engaged in the occupation of purchasing makeup now. With a 60% increase in the disability population by 2030, there's a strong business case for it. But with that said, I think it's really important to make sure that all parts of the product are designed with accessibility in mind, and not just one component of it. And I love that you talked about focus groups, because one of the most interesting projects to date that I've worked on is collaborating with the beauty brand to do testing, not just for marketing purposes. Of course, it can be used to kind of build brand loyalty and, speak to that part of your brand. But really in a way that's kind of familiar to us as healthcare professionals, doing the research, recruiting participants, testing, basically creating a very structured testing procedure. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about building frameworks for companies. But yeah, I think OTs bring, our expert knowledge of human movement, grasp styles. We can recommend different materials to use, whether that's stabilizing a product, making, different components with reduced effort to access it. And all that good stuff.
Great, and those images back here will sort of depict, products that have been adapted for a variety of folks.
And honestly, they're pretty. I don't think any of them scream ugly or anything like that. And I think what I hear a lot is people don't want to consider the different way that people perform occupations, because it'll look hospitalist, it'll look ugly. But these look cool.
I think generally with the newer products being developed with accessibility in mind or disability inclusive design, I think they are more aesthetically pleasing, because there's an effort to do that. But I don't want to call any products out, but I think that it's kind of a detriment when you're adding something on that's something you have to pay extra for, or if it's not just part of the design of the actual product, you have to add it on. Because in our conversations, we've been talking about how OTs worldwide are hacking products, modifying products so that they could be more usable for people with different abilities. And, that's always so valuable, because things that you use daily, personal care products, we use up to 12 a day. So, if these things are obstacles, then it really defeats the purpose of your morning routine, But yeah, I think that there's value in creating things that are inherently accessible, not something that you have to hack or modify. And I think there's a huge white space for companies to be able to do that, and again, serve this market.
Thanks, Esther. Now, Dawn, your work focuses on helping people thrive and age in place. As we think about accessibility beyond products, let's talk about where we live. You work with contractors, builders, and designers to ensure that homes truly work for people at different stages of their lives, right? So what's the biggest design flaw that you've seen out there?
Yeah, I think Esther sort of touched on this. And again, I'm not throwing any industry under the bus, because I have worked in many of them over my lifetime. But I think you touched on it when you said that we make a certain assumption about the people who are about to use our space. And when we talk about our homes, so interior designers, even like the Pottery Barns of the world, they assume a certain default user is going to be using that item. And honestly, that's just not true. There's the way the space was designed to be used, and then there's the way the space is used. And I can guarantee it is not the way that any of the designers planned on as it trickles down to the real world. So it's really important to kind of consider the fact that there is no default user. You kind of have to think for all the ways that your product, your service, or anything like that is going to be misused, and what other options may actually exist in that misuse. Because I think any one of us could tell you probably 15 million stories about people where we go in and we're like, oh, that's how you're using your dressing stick. Huh. Or, oh, you're using that binder clip for something I never would have used a binder clip for. And people get really innovative with those ideas. So when you're designing, don't assume anything. We know the saying, right?
And it's always important to observe who's using your product or your space or even your service, and how are you considering those needs that they have as you're using the service, product, or space.
Yeah, and it's this client-centered focus that occupational therapists bring to the table or in the design process. So again, just drilling that into everyone's brains. Francisco, you work with an architecture firm,
Yes.
designing spaces that are inclusive for everyone. Can you tell us what that looks like?
Yeah, so not a lot of occupational therapists work for an architecture firm because it's such a specialized kind of expertise. But when I work with architects, I collaborate with them during the design process from the earliest part all the way to evaluating the space, which is also important because when you're designing something, and what if some users are having a difficult time using that space? Even if it's ADA compliant, because there's a minimum ADA requirement, that's what most architects would follow. How can you go beyond accessibility? How can you consider all those design elements that would benefit people who are also using this space, people who have different abilities, identities, and backgrounds? So I collaborate with architects and make recommendations. We know that we can't accommodate everybody's needs, but at least there's one person who looks at the things that are being designed and question the status quo. Because a lot of times architects have been designing spaces they have their own way of doing it. But sometimes it really helps when somebody would point things out, like this signage is really small, or how would you be able to navigate this room if there's not enough lighting? Or sometimes even if the space is well designed, maybe a service that could complement that space would even make the space more inclusive. So consider that. If there's going to be a person who's going to provide service to the people using the space, would there be a space for that person? So it's the collaboration between the OTs and architects that kind of almost produce innovation, because that's a crossover between our lens, having a deep understanding of human function, and also the architect's lens, which is how they think about designing these spaces. And if there's a balance of both, that's going to be a better design.
Yeah.
Thanks, Francisco. Those are great examples. Now, for the audience, if anyone in the audience were interested in adopting occupation-centered design, what advice do you have for them on how to work with an occupational therapist or find an occupational therapist for that matter?
Yeah, so we just asked earlier how many people have met an occupational therapist, and we do have occupational therapists in the room. It's very easy to find us. We're in the healthcare settings. Most of us are in the healthcare settings because we are our traditional background being in the clinical setting. You can find us in skilled nursing facilities, schools, mental health settings, driver rehabilitation. There are so many ways, so many institutions that you can find OTs. You can even partner with schools with OT programs. In fact, in our firm, we partner with 4 universities. So we have inclusive design interns, and they're all OT students doing their capstone project with us. And it's really it's really great to have that presence in a design firm because, again, we have that human-centered lens that understands how the space is being used. Another way is, of course, LinkedIn. There are a lot of OTs in LinkedIn. There are a lot of OT groups in Facebook. There are also, maybe you have friends and family who might be OTs and you just didn't know.
Yeah.
We also have our Connect With Us slide, so you can find all of us.
Yeah, because I was
easier.
going to say, I don't know what industry everybody's in, but chances are between the four of us, we probably know somebody that is trying to break into that industry and break down those silos that exist. So feel free to reach out to us. I'm sure we could try to do that. So went a little early on that one, but I'll take it.
Thank you. So again, the idea is we want OTs and designers to collaborate and connect because that's where this change happens. That's where the real impact actually begins. So Dawn, can you share with us a real world example of what a successful collaboration might look like?
Yeah. Again, this will be kind of focused on the industries that I sort of navigate on a day-to-day. But I think one of the best examples that I personally have had was being called in pretty early into the project was really, really beneficial. And I think you'll see a theme through all of us about how the sooner we're called in, the better the collaboration can be. So I had a client who had a chronic illness that was progressive, and we knew that it was going to be getting worse as time went on. They had a decent amount of money that they wanted to invest in their home. They had already gone to a builder, and the builder had given them an idea of what this addition to their house could look like, which is phenomenal. Thankfully, it was a very informed user, so they kind of came to me and they were like, I think I need an OT to look at this because they have worked with OTs before. And so when I looked at the floor plan, I didn't judge it, I didn't do anything, I just kind of got to know the person, I got to know the occupations that she needed to complete in that space and what her ultimate goals were. And then when I looked at the plan, I had an opportunity to ask a lot of questions to her because she was kind of acting as the project manager. In a perfect world, I actually interact with the builders and architects directly. It makes communication just a little easier. But in this one, she took those questions back. And so what I did a lot of was just asking a lot of questions. Did you consider this? What happens when this occurs? One of the things that the designer, the architect, and the construction person hadn't considered was the fact that her illness was going to get progressive and she was actually going to probably need like ceiling lifts, equipment, a second person. They were too afraid to ask questions like, how do you use the bathroom? Which way do you wipe yourself? Like, I know that these are very uncomfortable questions, but if you don't understand how a person performs that occupation, you can't plan for it. So we went back and forth on 3 or 4 different reiterations until finally she felt happy, I felt happy. The things that we couldn't accomplish because of either money or budget were acceptable risks that we were going to take at that point. And when they built their home, it works out great. 2 years later, I still get updates about how much they love it, how much they haven't used parts that they thought they were going to use. So again, feedback for me, but we all kind of are considering the fact that it's probably going to be used. It's just taking longer than we thought because we had designed the space so well that the things that we had put in place weren't needed yet. So it actually increased the longevity of the plan that we had. So success.
It future-proofs your design when
Yes.
you really think about the occupation that happens in that space.
Yep.
That's such a powerful example, in my opinion, Dawn. I think that design teams may not realize sometimes that they're excluding individuals. And it doesn't, it takes...
Accident. It's never on purpose. But
Yes, and it takes, when they step back is when they actually realize that, okay, we may need to consult with someone with a different expertise.
Well, and I think, Esther, you had said it in a private conversation, so not on the panel, but you had said it's not a call out, it's a call in, and I just loved that because it's true.
Yeah, because some fields have their certain way of doing it, like out of habit too. Like, how can we break out of that habit and think better?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Fantastic. Now, Esther, have you seen a case where a product team recognized that something wasn't working out, and how did occupational therapy come to the rescue?
Oh, I don't know if I rescued the product, but I think being in the beauty and personal care, like packaging space, there's interest in creating things that are different from, standard stock packaging that's available. And so it's always exciting when I do have the opportunity to collaborate with design teams and they have like that insight or foresight to kind of like create future-proofed products. One example I can think of is a team that wanted to create accessible toiletry bags. And so they had already created kind of like their prototypes and, they had put together like a really amazing brief. And when I reviewed it, I realized that while the toiletry bag, it was easy to use once you had it opened. To open and close it would require, dexterity and coordination from both hands, which excludes a lot of people who are not able to, use both hands together. And so with OT Insights, I was able to make recommendations that spoke specifically to that aspect of the product, because we're not looking to redesign the entire thing. We suggested, I think I mentioned it in the previous question that I answered, but a zipper pull that glides easier so that there isn't as much effort put into it, using larger pulls or like a loop so that there's flexibility in the way that somebody opens and closes it. And then again, like stable materials and mechanisms to stabilize it so that once it's on a surface or on your lap or wherever you're accessing, your personal goods, like, you have you're able to do it without it falling all over the place. So I think for me, it really is about like looking at the product and the flow of the user experience and making sure that each step supports independence, ease of use, and it's not just one part of it. I think the mistake is that the tasks are split up and viewed in isolation. And I can give one example. Hopefully this is not a call out, but if you design a really fancy motorized tool that helps you apply your lipstick for people with disabilities, but you're not able to place the lipstick into the holder or remove it once you're done, and it has to basically live there and dry out, or who knows, like you apply it and then it's a one-time use type thing. And a lot of the time these like high-tech accessible tools can be very inaccessible financially. They come at a pretty high price point or require a lot of training and education. So I think considering all those factors and again serving the segment of the market that you're targeting, it's all important, but it's really important to look at the overall flow of the user experience. And I think because we analyze tasks and break each task down to steps, we can kind of see where there would be where the product would fail the user.
While you were talking, I was just thinking about that idea of over-engineering things, and that's where we tend to accidentally go when we're in the world. Our websites, our apps, there's too many features. Even this app for today is not very user-intuitive sometimes, and it's because there's so many features in it, there's so many things to look at. And so I think that was a really good point. I just wanted to add that in of don't over-engineer.
Yes.
Because it's ineffective.
Yeah, and simplicity, I think simple design is also very difficult to achieve. And, we had lengthy conversations about universal design and how that is a very, high standard. But that's why I'm a strong advocate for having options and choices that are available. Because, when it comes to products that you use daily, everybody uses it in a different way. Mm-hmm. And you really can't, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation, like whatsoever. Like from the formula itself to the primary packaging to the secondary packaging, like there's so many different factors that go into like why people choose things, why they continue to keep using it, even if it's difficult to use. So yeah. Thank you.
I forget. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned options, because sometimes if there's only one option, it doesn't work for you. For example, one case example, I have this, right? This was the original mic that I was planning to use earlier, but it didn't work. So I have this option at least, which my preference would have been this one, but since this isn't working, I'm still able to use a microphone. I was preferring to use this one because sometimes when I get really excited, I get shaky. But that's the value of options, because not all people do the same things in the same way.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to the disability community, I don't mean to speak for an entire community, but I think having choices and offerings and options available gives people the power of choice, the agency to choose what works for them, not like, oh, here's the most accessible and easy to open moisturizer, so this is the formula. Like our skin, we have different needs. So yes, I'm totally I'm with you on that, like all about choices.
Yeah, and it's not just about the spaces or products, but again, I mentioned earlier, services. I know we have some friends from International Monetary Fund here and Google. Those things could be designed as well with occupations in mind. So almost everything that we interact on a daily basis, those can be designed better with occupations in mind.
Yeah, and it's not limited to just disability. So we may talk about that and accessibility a lot because we tend to work in rehab spaces, so people have had a life-changing event or they're trying to recover from something. But I think the point of this is also to make the point that occupation-based design is not just for the accessibility side of it. It's not just for disabilities. I mean, yes, 1 in 4 adults here in the United States have a disability, whether visible or invisible, but those other individuals still benefit from this mindset of focusing on the final occupation, and that the person is going to interact with that occupation differently every day. Are they tired? Did your child keep you up all night? You know, like that changes how you do things.
I was just going to mention, I've been so inspired by like baby products because they are designed to be like used on the go or like easier to use. And, you know, there's like so much, it's really cool to see products from a different lens depending on your role and the occupations that you engage in. It's true.
And talking about disability, let's talk about getting old. All of us here, no exception. All of us
Getting old in the audience?
Right?
Okay, one guy.
And even if you're not old yet, at some point in your life, you will, to a greater or lesser degree, become disabled. Like some days you might feel like you feel stiff, or maybe you trip and something hurts and makes it difficult for you to perform things. But then again, like
most disabilities are acquired. You're not born with your disability most of the time. Like a good portion of them are acquired over your lifetime.
I think it's like 80%.
And after, what is it, like 60, I think, is when most of them occur. So if you don't have one yet, you probably will.
And close to a third of our population has some disability, whether it's physical or invisible disability.
To kind of like put that in a real world example, I think we all know someone who's been through, like a life-changing event, or even after delivery. For me personally, like my strength and my ability to do things totally different. And so on top of all those physical changes you're going through, not being able to engage in something that helps you express yourself, like beauty, personal care, even hygiene, it can really impact your well-being. And so I've heard stories like of people going through surgeries and then they're not able to blow dry their hair, and then they have to seek out services, and that totally takes away, your independence and in some cases dignity. And so, it's a very practical scenario that is being impacted.
Yeah, and I would add to that, like sometimes it's not like a really big thing that you have to do. For example, right now as I'm talking, so this is an occupation, right? This is an activity for me at this moment. I really want to be able to like also hear myself, but there's an echo which makes it challenging for me to hear my thoughts because of the echo. And I wish places like this could also be redesigned a little bit better.
Yeah.
Everybody else heard the echo? Yeah.
Or the temperature of the room could be too cold for some people.
I know.
I'm freezing, personally. So we're talking about design experiences that truly work for all of us. I want to just take a step back, because Esther, you mentioned the words universal design. I know that's been thrown around a lot. So would you all like to add or speak to that concept?
Sure, I can take a stab at it. So for universal design, I think one good example is something we call the curb cut effect, which you may have all heard of. So, curb cuts were designed to accommodate people who are wheelchair users, but now everyone carrying luggage, pushing strollers, people doing deliveries, it makes navigating and wayfinding way more accessible for people. So universal design, it's based on 7 different principles, and I'm not going to try to name all of them.
I know, our brains will be frazzled.
Yeah. But it's, it's a great standard that really serves as a guideline to help design products that are used by the biggest number of people possible without the need for modifications or adaptations.
Yeah, it's a standard that exists, but I would say all of us would probably agree that it's almost only a place to start sometimes you have to go a step farther into, there's other design concepts in the construction world, like adaptable living, functional design, things like that, that you kind of have to go that next step. So yeah, lots of terms.
Yeah, and the traditional way of thinking about universal design is that one design, space, product, service accommodates the need. It's not really considering like the options, but this one product, one space, everybody can use it, right? I would like to differentiate accessibility, universal design, inclusive design, and occupation-centered design. So if I can be a little bit more visual here. So if it's accessibility, it's like a basic requirement, especially for buildings. They have a minimum ADA requirement that they have to follow. So accessibility is here, right? That's very basic. And a lot of times accessibility, they address more physical disabilities. When you think about inclusive design, it's like above that, right? So there's a lot more consideration than accessibility, considering all those different principles that you have to keep in mind, but still, maybe it's still limited. When you think about inclusive design, you are including the people who are using the product, space, or service, and considering their needs, which might be very different because we're such a diverse population, right? And occupation-centered design is like the lens that you use to be able to do inclusive design because you're including experts who are not, traditionally in your team to look at your product and maybe design it better.
Yeah, I think I can provide an example of that. So I loved what you said about evaluation and our ability to do that, because when I'm working with brands and looking at their product line and I do assess using universal design principles, I can come up with, like a score, basically that scores each item in your product line and how accessible it is. But that's just a starting point, like you had mentioned, Dawn, and then working with the brand closely to determine the occupation of the niche that you're serving, of the user that you have in mind when you're creating this product. It takes an occupation-centered lens. So like, where is this person going? What are they doing? What are they getting ready for? Like all of those things. So I think, that's a great kind of like, I don't want to say hierarchy, but like a good way to kind of build up.
Visual.
Yeah, a good visual.
It's more of a focused way of approaching inclusive design.
Yeah.
Thank you for that distinction. Now we'd love to open it up to the audience, open it up for questions. For any of you who might have any questions for us, you can feel free to come on up to the middle and ask away.
We're also very comfortable with awkward silence.
Well, the first
Wait
raised
for
one.
Hi.
Our fellow OTs in the house.
I'm the proof point. So I work in brand activation and events, but I also have an OTD from Duquesne. Shout out Pittsburgh. Yeah. I'm curious how you make the case for cost. A lot of times working with partners who don't understand the value of what A, OT brings, but B, what accessibility and engagement means for a lot of these communities, it's hard to get people on board. Yeah. I know there's tons of grant opportunities for home remodeling. I'm not sure about architecture and product design, but thinking more through the lens of like the business side, how do you make the case for the partners that you're working with? And why this is valuable.
I have an opinion on that, if you guys don't mind.
Go for it.
I had a feeling.
As the business owner, I encounter this a lot, and I have several OT colleague friends who actually work like internationally in Singapore and working with some of these amazing like Toyota Innovation Lab and things like that. And one of the things that they had to do was come from the business side. And so I will say, if you're on the business side, one of the things that you could do to fight for this is that, one, you have to invest in a product. You have to be willing to invest in that. And I think a lot of businesses understand that. If you spend $500, I can save you $100,000. So being able to figure out that little bit of research it's a little nebulous, but if you can find out those stats, I think it makes a really big part. I also think that when we're talking about future proofing and we're talking about the sheer number of individuals who either have a disability already or are going to have one, that is sometimes an in. because those are tangible numbers that are indisputable. Our census data shows this. And so sometimes when you have that physical hard data to say, these are the people that you need to start planning for now, because you don't want to be caught with your pants down later because some other company is already thinking about it and they are going to usurp yourself, because that is what businesses do. If they don't adapt quickly enough, they are going to get left behind. I mean, I feel it even within myself right now. Like, I've been doing great for the 5 years that I've been going, but the grant space is disappearing. And so now I'm trying to figure out, how do I pivot really fast, because working with the larger nonprofits that were doing accessibility because they care about older adults, their funding is disappearing under this current climate that we're in. I'll address the elephant in the room. And how does my business going to survive? And it's going to be finding out those hard numbers, talking about the investment, and making sure that they understand it's really expensive to retrofit or completely redesign or multi-million-dollar public spaces, right. So don't wait.
And sometimes it's not the difference, because I was involved in designing an inclusive bathroom. The difference in cost is not really that significant. Yeah, it's just amazing, because like architects think, this one would cost more. But then again, if you have an expert in the room during the design process who might be able to provide you with recommendations, it really isn't that expensive. And it creates brand loyalty. You know, people are going to use your space more. If you're designing products, they're just going to buy your products more. If I'm going to be in a convenience store and I'm buying 2 products with the same quality, but I would think, which one of these is easier to open? I would get that other one that's easier to open.
People spend a lot of money on things that they love.
Right, and on the product side, I think I approach it it can be approached in different ways, but I think one example that came to mind as Francisco was speaking was for a brand. When we did the research study, it showed that just the finish of the primary packaging made a difference in the ability to grasp the applicator. So it's just choices that are made by the brands, and it can be readily available, like stock packaging, or choices that don't necessarily cost more. You don't need to custom tool everything. And so I think really highlighting that you know, as OTs, we're really about strengths-based approaches. And so like, if a brand has an extensive product line, we could probably identify something there that is accessible, market it that way, and then maybe it can show a strong business case for why they should invest in maybe like a custom product. But yeah, there's like niche brands, I'm sure, you know, many people have seen, that are kind of, their entire brand identity is around accessibility. And so I think, like we're saying, like it's a trend that will become a standard. Like skin tones, you know, we have now, I think 21 is like the baseline, but I'm hopeful and working towards a future that has an offering for different abilities in each and every brand.
Talking about the future, by 2050, there will be more older adults than school-age children. Now think about it. Is our environment, are our products ready to meet the needs of older adults? Probably not right now, but then again, designers, you can get older and you might be the one using those products, those spaces, those services. So that's why it's just better design. It's a moral imperative.
And it sounds like businesses won't really have a choice but to start employing this type of perspective as well.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the question.
Hi. It's freezing in here.
It is so cold.
We need to talk to somebody.
So cold.
Need a fireplace.
I appreciate this conversation so much. I know that occupational therapy is not just about occupations, but a lot of the conversation that this conversation really focused on the sort of personal use, residential, and I know, Francisco, you work in public spaces. I'm really curious about challenges and opportunities in the workplace and occupation sort of centered design in the workplace and being more inclusive, some of the challenges and maybe some opportunities from all of you.
Yeah, I also teach at a university, and so I was just teaching ergonomics actually, and I think that one of the ways to get workplaces to be more inclusive and to think about the occupation of work is kind of through the ergonomic lens. I feel like a lot of businesses already have their HR departments trained in ergonomics or things like that. So an opportunity would be to definitely think about what are the products that are used in an office space And my first thought is that that's where you start. That is not the end, that is just the start. So how could you get items that are purchased that did think about all people with occupations, so that when you replace office chairs, maybe we replace them with these. I will say that one of the things about workspaces is that there's company cultures as a whole. Then you get down to where like the CEO levels are, and then you get to manager, and that culture changes in each work group that you're with. And so you're fighting this sort of uphill battle in workspaces and making them inclusive. So there's a lot of opportunity. I feel like this should be a whole nother panel on itself. So I'm hoping I'm giving you something there. But yeah, workplaces are hard because there's a lot of culture that you're fighting first.
Yeah, I'm automatically thinking about a worker's experience in the workplace, not even necessarily the space in which they're working in, right?
Yeah.
So workers should also feel safe and comfortable, right? They should be able to focus and concentrate on their work.
Yeah, and going back to the different, so work is an occupation, right? But within that occupation, there are those mini occupations that you have to do. Is the environment supportive of that? Would your colleagues be supportive of what you're doing? And sometimes it's not just about physical disability or ergonomics, it could be sensory. We process things differently because we have very different sensory profile. Is your environment supporting that? You know, is there better acoustics? Is the lighting okay? Is there nature that you can see so that you can feel great about being in the office?
And I hate to bring it back to capitalism, but this is the world that we live in. And as the business owner, companies speak money. That's what they care about. I love humans. I'm all about person first, but companies don't normally care. So one of the best things to do is to think about it from a monetary standpoint or benefit to the company to make that real impactful change. What is employee retention? How much does it cost to train a new one? If you keep losing people because the work experience is so miserable, then why aren't you changing the work experience? I think those are really some of the best ways in, because that's what a CEO cares about. Your manager just wants you to get your stuff done. They care about productivity, but your CEO, the person who makes the change, your C-level suite, they talk money, and that's what they need to know. That's what the shareholders care about. So again, that's kind of where I come from.
Yeah. It's a business strategy. You can definitely use it as a business strategy.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you for your presentation. It's very valuable.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
As occupational therapists, if you had a limited amount of time to tell enlightened developers, designers, what would you tell them that they need to do?
Developers, is that what you said?
Developers, designers.
So software developers.
In the digital world.
Well, not just limited to software, but
more in that realm than, okay.
well, it's more open to interpretation.
Sounds good. I can take that one too. I don't want to monopolize unless someone else has it.
You can chime in.
My husband is a web engineer. That's why I was asking. He's a software developer. And I think one of the best things they can do is there's actually a lot of OTs that work in UI and UX. And so if you can potentially within that tech world get an OT who focuses on that, they're going to know your language. They're going to know how to write the tickets properly so things can get fixed, right? Because there's always going to be a mistranslation of what I think it means versus what the ticket means. So when developers are working, I think that the best thing is to try to find an OT who works in UI UX. There's a lot of them out there, believe it or not, because we get tired in the rehab space and we go to alternative places, but we still bring our systems thinking.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And there's a parallel, like with user experience and OT, because when you think about it, this whole environment is a big user interface because we interact with it. We just interacted in 3D. We're not doing this or clicking, but we're actually moving the chair, feeling the texture, so we're interacting. So that's why there's a parallel between user experience, because we as OTs, we care about user experience. Yeah. And that's why there's also a huge opportunities for the designers in the digital world to also work with occupational therapists who have that human-centered knowledge.
Yeah, because it goes beyond like the web accessibility piece that I think that's sort of the digital world's ADA. And again, it's a great place to start, but it's not the end of it. So in the end, including maybe if you have focus groups when you're rolling out something or you're in the testing phase, those are kind of the places to kind of seek that feedback. I hope that answers the question that you were asking.
I think one thing we also mentioned was to sort of employ this expertise or this body of knowledge early on in the design process, right? Not to wait until you're already towards the end and you're having to sort of put us in there as a complement, but we should be part of the foundation.
Yeah. And I think, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to jump in and say, I agree. And I also think that there is value in bringing our lens in at any point or any step of the way, because we are really focused on the company or the brand or the product strengths. I think there's always something that we can highlight and then, identify like an area to improve on.
Build on, yes. Thank you for your question, sir.
Hi, so I work in the risk management field, which means I work a lot with workers' compensation injuries and working with HR teams to make sure they're compliant with the ADA interactive process.
Yeah.
But here's the challenge that I see. In the ADA interactive process, the parties in that meeting are usually HR, the employee, and the manager. And they are knowledgeable about the job, but not about the creativity and what you're talking about in terms of creating a inclusive workspace. So usually I'll see separations of employment only because those three people in that meeting couldn't come up with a solution.
Correct.
So how can employers find OT specifically to bring into that process for those interactive process meetings to make sure they find creative solutions? Because there's ways to keep employment for somebody, it's just lack of creativity in the room, and I'm afraid that happens quite a bit.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, it's also about examining where the pain points are, like for the whole experience, and assessing it. Because if you're able to assess it and show it that, hey, this is where the problem is, and maybe we can offer some creative solutions for this.
I actually work in the workers' comp space too. If you can't tell, I have ADHD, so I do a lot of stuff. But one of the things I do is construction in the workers' comp spaces. So when people have a catastrophic injury, I'm helping figure out what is. I actually act as the mediator, the third-party independent party that isn't. I care about the payer, right, the insurance company, and I care about the employee, but I'm there to help them figure out what the solutions are. So believe it or not, I mean, you could just, if your company's open to it, just one-time trial, bringing an OT in, because we are the encyclopedia. We have a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and like you were saying, it's just a lack of creativity. Because I can't tell you the number of times, for example, people have been like, we need a monitoring system and this really expensive age tech, we can't afford it. And I'm like, get a pet camera. They're like $120. They work better than most of the ones that I would purchase for dementia. And people are like, what? And I'm like, yeah, just get the pet camera. The Wopet's great. Like, I use it for my dog. You can use it for your mom. Like, you know what I mean? And it's just that out-of-the-box thinking. And we bring a little bit of that because we work in healthcare, which has zero money.
Yes.
And the things that we come up with using just like moldable clay for adapting material is amazing. So
We're hackers.
call me, connect with me. I'm happy to chat more because there's a lot there.
We will help you come up with a creative solution.
Yes.
It's within budget.
Yeah. And honestly, it's just hire a consultant for a certain fee. You spend an hour, you'll get more answers than you've ever thought that you could get. And that $200 is worth it. You know what I mean?
And going back to the business case, I think the benefit of working with an OT in this regard is that we can represent like a wide body of people with different abilities. And then when you want to hone in on like a specific thing, then you can go more niche. But yeah, it's a better investment.
It is. It's all about investment.
All right. Any other questions from our crowd, from the audience? We cover everything?
If you have additional questions, we'll be hanging out outside, just so you know.
How are we doing on time?
I was going to say, just looked, it's 12:30, so
Okay.
I think we're doing good.
We're doing great. So just to wrap up a little bit, today we started with this idea that bad design doesn't just frustrate people, and it actually excludes people. So design that doesn't consider diversity or the different ways that we are is actually bad design, and it doesn't work. If your design doesn't work for all people, it doesn't work, and the missing link, as we've drilled into your brains, is occupational therapy. We bring to the process this very occupation-centered lens, this occupation-centered focus that will really elevate the whole experience for everybody. By weaving in OT principles into the design process, we're really creating experiences and innovations that are Again, human-centered and adaptable. Before we wrap up, I'd love for our panelists to perhaps leave us with a key takeaway and maybe a call to action for some of our designers and audience members.
Yeah. So when you think about occupation-centered design and when you have an occupational therapy lens, coming from a healthcare profession, we care about people. So we can help you translate that care into design. We can make the space, product, service, care for people. That's the simplest way I can put it.
Yeah. I can go if you want. I was going to say, access to what we're trying to design is really the standard. That's our goal, and it's just the baseline of good design is making sure that anyone can access it at any point in their life in any mental state that they're in. And I think my call to action would be that if you have an opportunity or if you're a decision maker in your company, bring in that occupation-based design a whole lot earlier. Very, very early into the process, whether it's with an actual occupational therapist or just learning more about that concept, that can go a long way too, because we do understand some businesses are not going to hire consultants, but you all are here, so your job is to go be the ambassador for this mindset.
For me, I guess I'll bring it back to beauty and personal care as we wrap up. But I think something that research shows to be so health promoting and, well-being promoting when we look at things like neuroaesthetics and like just the power of like looking at beautifully designed products or like just beauty in general and how that positively impacts your brain chemistry. Basically, it should be something that is accessible and doesn't stand as a barrier or as an obstacle. And so I think for me the call to action would be to like brands and companies to really recognize that there is so much potential, there is a huge white space to create products that can fill this need and this gap so that OTs don't have to stick tennis balls on eyeliners so people can use them.
OTs could be your secret sauce.
So tomorrow or next week when you go back to work, we want to challenge you. We want you to think a little bit differently. We want you to think about who you're designing for, whether it's working or not, and what occupation are you designing for? So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for coming here. I know there are a lot of sessions, but thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you, panelists. You're amazing.
Thank you for moderating.
And that wraps up another inspiring episode of the Uncommon OT series. Connect with me at www.transitionsot.com. And don't forget to sign up to be part of the Transitions OT community. By doing so, you'll receive my latest compiled list of uncommon OT practice settings, the latest news on mentoring offerings, uncommon OT live events, non-traditional OT resources, and more. You may also follow me on my social media pages on Instagram and LinkedIn. And if you love this episode, head on over to Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, and Google Podcasts to follow, rate, and leave a review. I also ask you to consider pledging your support to my Passion Podcast project by being a patron on Patreon. It is very much appreciated. Sending big OT love. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.